Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. In today's episode, we are excited to have Matthew Barnes, the founder of Proteus Digital Lab, join us. Matthew has an inspiring journey transitioning from an engineering background and a traditional internship to launching a successful agency and building a SaaS product tailored for e-commerce entrepreneurs. Matthew's SaaS platform is specifically designed to help sellers transition a side gig to a full-scale business by making enterprise-level insights accessible and actionable. Today, we'll dive deep into his journey, discuss the challenges of scaling an e-commerce business, and explore how Proteus Digital Lab is empowering entrepreneurs to achieve financial freedom. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. So to start things off, can you share a little bit about your story of being an engineer and making that jump into SaaS?
Yeah, of course. So my background originally was structural engineering. I was doing a master's degree in mechanical engineering and landed myself an internship, which is what everybody hopes to do kind of in the engineering world. And sitting at a desk every day and picking concrete beam sizes out of a catalog, I was like, oh no, I've made a huge mistake. And there was an apparel brand that I was quite keen on, and I convinced them to hire me on to do some of their marketing materials for their e-commerce brand. Just basically like put myself out there by redoing a bunch of their campaign stuff and then just emailing it to them. And because I had no formal training whatsoever, I had a bootleg copy of Photoshop and a lot of time on my hands at college. And so convinced them somehow to bring me on. And fast forward a year or so later, I dropped out of my master's program to be the operator for that e-commerce company, that brand. And in doing so, I had to wear all of the hats. I flew out to the warehouse, set up the distribution, et cetera. And it's just really kind of that like spirit of like when you really want to like kind of shape your own destiny and take things into your internal locus of control, that desire to just kind of like learn everything, right? And you know, at that time we're talking like 2010 or something. That time is like kind of like the golden age of just information on the internet where you can just learn anything. And so I started doing consulting out of that because it was really interesting, and I didn't like solving one person's problems. I wanted to solve lots of people's problems. And the joke that I used to make was, you have multiple jobs, that's unethical. You have multiple clients, and that's a company. And so I transitioned into doing consulting, which eventually became what we now call Proteus Digital Lab. And we kind of as I moved through that ecosystem, realized that e-commerce in particular was like there's a vacuum for people that had like a strong numerical literacy. And so my skills around statistics with doing the engineering became incredibly useful for understanding analytics and knowing which bits of data to trust and make educated decisions. And so again, that morphed into Proteus Digital Lab now, which is an agency that I run. Took all my favorite people that I'd worked with in the past, all with like very non-traditional backgrounds. I always joke that it's the island of misfit toys. You just took everybody that was basically unemployable and gave them control kind of within their own domain in our company. And we work with, big e-com brands, doing 8 or more figures in gross revenue. And we have a lot of data to play with. And we built a bunch of custom tooling to help them make these like weaponized decisions around analytics and things. And the thing that is sort of like my slow hunch over time is realizing that like, man, at its core, like a lot of these things are very useful to any scale of business to be able to understand their customer behavior a bit more, because as the marketplace for e-commerce gets tougher and tougher, the people that win are the ones that can have a understanding of the lifetime cycle of that customer and be able to break it down by channel and intro product and all of that. And so we're launching by the time this airs a waitlist for people to come on and be able to enjoy the benefits of that software, really designed around like how do we make these enterprise level like insights and data analysis like incredibly accessible to people that have these like side gig businesses, these really small e-com situations, right? And give them kind of the competitive advantage and teach them how to look at their own data in a way that can let them scale it and, well, fire the man.
There we go. I love it. And I'm really excited to get into some of the more technical aspects of Proteus and understanding customer lifetime value and things like that. But this is the Firing the Man podcast, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that career transition. Yeah. And I can speak from personal experience. I was a risk-averse accountant. My parents were very happy with that decision. There was a positive ROI on becoming a risk-averse accountant. And I'm sure you probably had a similar thing getting your master's in engineering. And when I decided to leave my kind of abandon my academic training and go into e-commerce, which was not necessarily like an established industry at the time, right, I had some people in my life that did not think that was a great decision. And so I'm curious, for our listeners that are considering firing the man, but have voices in their, people talking to them and telling them, hey, that's foolish. What were your experiences there, and what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, boy, I love this one. So yeah, as you can imagine, right, I've put all this time in, I've spent all this money to go to university, explaining to my parents that I was dropping out of the program to go work for a clothing company was a confusing conversation for them. Especially because, at the time it was a big risk to make that transition. I was going to make very little money doing it by comparison to what I could have, gotten out of a structural engineering job or something like that. The thing that always is like the voice kind of in the back of my head that I let sort of lead these decisions is, will I always look back and wonder what would have happened if I had gone and given this a punt? Because the thing is that jobs will be around for basically forever, right? And like the sell to my parents was, look, the university will actually let you go for like 2 years, like in between like years or whatever. Like I could always go back if this whole thing doesn't work out, right? Knowing that full and well I was never going back. But like, the thing is, traditional industry will always be there. And the thing is, too, is like you don't want to romanticize the idea of hanging up your own shingle, because it is legitimately incredibly hard, right? It's also incredibly satisfying. And so generally speaking, when I'm talking to other people that are thinking about this sort of thing, my advice generally is like, keep your foot in 2 boats for as long as you possibly can. And then take your foot out of the easy boat, right? And commit yourself to the really hard one, right? It's doing it on your own when you absolutely must. Because I think there's 2 things. Like back in the day, like nobody had any frame of reference for like what the hell I was doing. Like it was just like, dude, like you have this like sorted, like you're getting like the degree, you went to a great school, like you could just do this, right? But like I couldn't live with myself not knowing what would have happened if I went and followed this thing that I was like really, really interested in. That energy like really pushed me forward in that regard. And I had been working with this company, right, for a number of years. And it basically came down to a foot in 2 boats. Like I either have to write a thesis which means I'm not going to have any time for anything, or I'm going to have to drop out. Like I took it to the last mile, and I've done that over and over and over again. And I think culturally now there's the risk in the other end of the spectrum, which is that we over romanticize the idea of entrepreneurship or the kind of like the gig worker or whatever, to the degree that we take risks that are not calculated, right? And then find out, oh, this is actually very hard, right? And so I think the thing is, like, there is a way to go after these things that you're like really excited about, right? And pour all of your energy into it and kind of like transition out of the other things that you're doing. And that can make those discussions like a little easier. But, I think the thing is that my advice always and forever is the way you can find out that you're really, really sure about something is like, can you keep your foot in two boats instead of like hopping toward the shiny object? And if you can manage that, man, don't listen to a single person, just go after it.
I love it. And that's really good advice. And to all of our listeners who are in that part of their life, I think it's so critical to listen to yourself, listen to your gut. And I really like the question that you asked yourself of, am I going to regret this? And that's like a really solid guiding principle for making all kinds of decisions, whether it's career related or not. So, well, very good. We needed to spend some time on that with the title of the podcast and the hundreds of wonderful stories that we've had on the show of people that have fired the man. So, let's get into Proteus Digital Lab. How does it serve e-commerce entrepreneurs?
That's a great thing here. So basically, right, like the rub when you are starting out as like an e-com entrepreneur is you're trying to understand the value of your customers, like what you're actually serving, right? And so there's a bazillion and one tools that can kind of like do some surface level analysis, but as the landscape gets more and more competitive, the thing that I think that I see people do too often, right, is kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink at trying to just like acquire customers on like that first order, and then sort of like hope everything is fine afterwards, or maybe just do some like back calculating on things. And so the thing that I'm realizing is like the big advantage that we're really optimizing for at the enterprise level is we do conversion rate optimization, analytics, and development services for these like larger companies, right? We're doing like very in the weeds kind of like development to support different promotions and incentives and things at like a very deep level for these Shopify stores. But at the core of it, what we're really trying to solve for is who are the best customers, and how do we ensure that when we are acquiring new customers that we're acquiring the good ones, right? And so being able to look at things like lifetime value by acquisition channel, being able to look at things like lifetime value by first order behavior, that's the kind of stuff that as like an entrepreneur, you're trying to find the sustainable element of your business that you can then scale. Because if you can have like very good surety, right, that maybe on this one product that you acquire first customers through, the lifetime value is 3 times this other like fungible product, right? You can go after that one and have like a really like a very precise idea of what your tolerable cost to acquire is. And so when you're looking at the competitive landscape of everyone else who's playing in your industry, in your space, right? If they're very myopic toward that first order, or they're just kind of like blending together their lifetime value over like the entire store, if you know that you've got that bit there that's like very, very efficient and you can isolate it and make that measurement, then you can outbid them, right? And then you can scale beyond them very, very quickly once you can isolate that.
I like it. I'd like to dive in here a little bit more on, why don't we illustrate it with an example? So say you have entrepreneur A who knows the lifetime value of his customer on a particular product, and you have entrepreneur B who doesn't, who's kind of finger in the wind guessing. How are their decisions going to be different? And how is entrepreneur A at an advantage by knowing this lifetime value?
Yeah. So I'll give you a very practical example. So, very recently we're working with a brand that sells like home goods that are used in the bathroom and things, and so they've got like a nice recurring potential for revenue there, right? Like these types of products are really, really interesting because they have the potential, if you can get the recipe right, to be very good in lifetime value. Entrepreneur B, right? He's got his in statistics, there's a thing called histograms, which is you kind of plot, if you imagine the number of orders per customer and then the number of customers that fall into each one of those buckets. Usually you have kind of like a spike at like one order, and then you kind of have like a little curve that maybe hits like 3 or 4 orders or whatever, right? And so if you're averaging that all together, you're going to under index on some of the customers, right? You're going to assume the entrepreneur B is going to be saying, oh, my average is 2 orders per customer. Entrepreneur A, if he is able to isolate out the bottom part of that curve and the top part, can find those people that are the 3 to 4 orders and then outbid for that traffic. So, for example, like a practical application to this might be that through an acquisition channel, whether it's Meta or whatever the thing is, right? You might run an ad set that only allows someone to buy a 3-pack of your product. And you know that 3-pack has a very specific lifetime value associated with it compared to being able to buy a single unit of the product. And so you can go out with confidence, right, and drive traffic to that 3-pack. And then, sure, on the return visits or after they've made that first purchase, let them replenish at a 1-pack or whatever the thing is. But if you can isolate like lifetime value by pack size or subscription behavior, et cetera, as opposed to just kind of like, doing this blended analysis where you might say subscription is definitely good, right? Like sometimes depends on the product, depends on the behavior, et cetera. But if you can delineate those things, then you can get really specific again by channel and how qualified that audience is to know what you can allow their first purchase behavior to be.
I like it. I really like it. And I think that's something that really would give great insight into where are the winners in my catalog. And that may not necessarily be the highest sales volume, which I think a lot of people look at. And I know when I was back in the day fulfilling my own orders, I knew the popular colors and sizes of the products that I was selling, but I wasn't drilling down to, are they the most profitable? Are these the best sales for the business? Yes. It kind of seemed like, well, these are getting the most sales. So when I'm talking to my paid media person, these are the ones we're going to focus on, right? And so right. I really like that. I like that data-driven decision. And so what with, for speaking to more of the beginners on say setting up a Shopify site in the first couple of years, what data is available to help with that? Or maybe to ask this differently, why is there a need for outside like third-party services such as Proteus to make this calculation?
Yeah, I think that the thing is that it's all about kind of looking at like the long tail behavior in aggregate, right? And so you want to look at things like return rate, like repeat purchase behavior, and be able to delineate again, like what that first touch was. Was it through a particular channel? Was it buying a particular product? Whatever that thing might be. It's difficult to do comparison analysis, right? And know when to trust the data with such a small sample size. So one of the things that is really, really important to me is that like the vast majority of tools out there that you can use to measure things, like, first of all, they don't get very granular, right? And then second of all, like they sometimes get granular, but then you can chase ghosts. So one of the mistakes I made early on, right, 15 years ago, as I was like doing this is I'd try to look at the data again, to your point on like colors and sizes and things like this. And I had no idea that I was like committing statistical sins, that I wasn't looking at a large enough sample size, that I had these like inherent biases in it. And so one of the things that we couple is like every comparison that you build, like in our analysis tool, right, actually gets statistical significance attached to it. So you get to see alpha and beta to know, is there a difference? Can I trust what that difference is, et cetera, to help kind of guide you in that decision making. And if you can embed those values early on in like growing a company, you're going to spend a lot less time screwing around on wild goose chases, like kind of going after things. And I think that's like a really important thing, is like a lot of the values I think that you hold or sort of like pivot your company around can be really, really important. Because I've seen some really interesting things like, on even on the bigger scale, we've had some clients that we've worked with. There was one in particular, they had this partnership set up that they set up very early on in kind of scaling the company. And that partnership was like an acquisition channel. So when they were looking at their lifetime value, when they were looking at orders per customer, et cetera, they were always kind of blending all of the things together because they had a couple of different acquisition channels, right? And when we went through and started doing an analysis, the thing that we realized is that for that one very specific offer, which is like very high volume, very high revenue, et cetera, when you actually kind of broke it down and factored in COGS, et cetera, it had a slightly negative lifetime margin. And so it was a third of the revenue. And so we ended up going to them and saying, hey guys, I know we just started this engagement to kind of scale things up or whatever, because you've got all this volume. I'm actually going to recommend that we pause for a quarter. You need to go actually fire this affiliate arrangement or whatever. I need you to drop your revenue by a third, because it's going to actually give you the same margin. And I need you to go scale around this other offer. And so we paused the engagement, waited 3 months, and then re-engaged again. But it's one of those things where they've been making this mistake for 4 years, where they had been, again, and you can get really upside down, because especially if you're running ads to some of these deals that end up having this poor lifetime behavior, you can train the meta algorithm very early on in your relationship with ad buying to find you junk customers. And that's one of the most dangerous things, I think, to scale.
I think that's really, I really like that story. And I think everyone probably that's running their own company probably has something like that they are not seeing. They're stuck in, they can't see the forest through the trees. And, from a just peace of mind standpoint, I can remember at the height of Amazon when I was spending tens of thousands of dollars every month on ads, and I didn't have great confidence in what are we seeking. And I think having a more defined strategy on, if I pay X, this will deliver Y, and here's the data to support that decision. When the credit card statement comes, it feels a little less risky. And I think that's something people focus a lot on. And I've made this mistake before, a lot on the paid traffic side of things, and not the economics of the products that they're selling and of the customers that they're selling to. So curious, what was your aha moment with Proteus, where you said, there's a need here and I'm the guy to fill that need?
It was actually early on, when I was just beginning to do conversion rate optimization as part of our consulting. We were sitting down with a brand, and they were doing 9 figures in gross revenue. And I'm looking through their analytics that the vice president of marketing is looking at every single week or whatever, right? And as I'm kind of looking through their funnel analysis, we're looking at, okay, people that reach the cart, people that reach the checkout, how many, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, hey, just it seems like a silly question to ask, but this data is directional, right? And he said, what? And I said, you're showing the number of people that have visited the cart and the checkout or whatever, but this is directional, right? They have to have gone from the cart and then to the checkout, and you're not counting if they go back to the cart, right? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to work on that. I'll come back. Let me just take a look, just to check, right? Because it's a silly question, but I'll take a look. And as I realized it, I realized that people that have this sort of traditional background, in marketing, et cetera, are they don't look at things from a data perspective. I'm thinking about it from I'm doing power curves on earthquake analysis and in doing finite element things and dynamics and all of this, right? So I'm looking at purely from a mathematical perspective, because we're just cleaning data and stuff all the time. Well, what I found out was that when you actually forced the data to be directional and read it both directions, they had an extremely large percentage of people that were going to checkout and then back to the cart and then not completing. So as I started digging through the UX, what I realized is that they had this express checkout thing that skipped the cart, right? And it said secure checkout, and you would click it, and it would dump you right into the checkout. And this is like 2015 or something. So like nobody is experienced with this sort of thing. And what was happening is that people were getting to the checkout being like, I didn't ask for this. What the heck's going on? And then back navigating to the cart. But when they looked at their just general funnel analysis, all the numbers went from bigger to smaller, right? So they never caught it. So we ran a CRO test that changed the word secure to express. So it said express checkout. That test made about $5 million. And I was like, I think that we should probably spend a lot of time actually getting into the weeds on some of this data stuff, because it's easy to take for granted, especially when you're working with these big companies, right? Like you imagine they've got it all together. But this was this big aha moment of just like, wow, like turns out, right? Everybody is just a person. And it's easy, depending on what your background is, to get really myopic into some of these things. And so when we approach it from such a like purely mathematical perspective, right? And we come backwards from real questions, it can drive like a tremendous amount of value that isn't like immediately apparent.
I like it. I really like that answer. And that's a really cool example. I am asking myself the same question of, I have a brand where when I look at the data analytics, the numbers get smaller, and I have never asked the question, is that directional? And if I knew the answer to that question, I would do things differently. And so that's an awesome story, a really good story. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about, and I think you have a really unique lens in that you are working with large companies, companies that are, presumably successful. That's how they got so big. And I would imagine as you work with and it's more than one, right? You are working with several clients. And so what are some common themes that you've observed of the people that are crushing it in e-commerce? What are some, maybe characteristics of their products or characteristics of their business that seem to make them stand out and reach that 8-figure or 9-figure mark?
Yeah, I think there's there is an allure to selling products that are easy to convert on and easy to convert on quickly, right? And I find that, as I look across all the spectrum of businesses that we've worked with, we have some who I kind of refer to it as like a smash and grab, which is they've got this like very tight funnel that, oftentimes is kind of like a little bit fear-based, right? And they convert really, really well. And they've maybe scaled to $30 million in gross revenue. And when you start teasing apart the business, it's like, wow, this is on a house of cards, right? If anything changes about this funnel, any rule changes, anything, you're hung. This business is worth the peanuts. And so the ones that I see do really, really well focus on thinking about like the holistic like customer journey. It's a very hard problem to solve, right? But thinking about selling a product that forms a relationship, those are the ones that no matter what happens, they remain durable. Meta goes and does some change and it screws everybody upside down or whatever, they're fine. They've got this nice relationship that they built with these customers. They're coming in very qualified. It's maybe like a slower like ramp up, but they're winning the game on lifetime margin. And I really think that is the thing, because when you think about all of the things that can mess up your new customer acquisition, the moat is lifetime margin. And so if you're building a business that is very durable because you're looking at that whole customer life cycle and you're really optimizing for those good relationship type customers, nobody can touch you in the long term.
I really like that. And I will share from my experiences in mergers and acquisitions in my previous life. That also really moves the needle on the value of your business. Like if you're looking to exit and have a nice big exit that changes your life, that is something that definitely gets focused on. And that number is heavily scrutinized during the due diligence process, because the buyer really wants to know, what am I buying and what do the economics of it look like? And so I really like that. Now, you had a little teaser at the beginning of the episode about, you're working with very large clients, but there is a new waitlist to allow smaller brands and up and coming entrepreneurs to interact with some of the tools that you've built. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, in kind of building our analysis software, first of all, like we built it basically to answer hard questions in the realm of conversion rate optimization, or really it's lifetime margin optimization, but it's too many letters. So, as we've kind of built that out, very quickly it became apparent that this was useful to people that were making the decisions at the top. And so oftentimes we get drug into board meetings basically to help answer questions for the board. And then we get pulled into meeting with the private equity firms that own the companies. And really, really quickly, it became apparent, right, that this data is like very instrumental in making high level like business decisions. And the fundamentals of that are applicable to anyone. Now, can we tolerate working with literally every single company? No, unfortunately. I would love that, right? I want to serve the people that have found a cool niche, that have built like a really great product, and they want to kind of scale it. And one of the things, my childhood hero was Robin Hood, and I very much, right, like that is like fueled a lot of my like rebellious nature. But like I want to sort of like steal these insights from the big companies and give it to the small companies and let them compete. That's really at the core of like my value system. And so I realized that the thing that people who are trying to scale these businesses really need is essentially like education and tools. And so it's easy for me then to participate in various communities or to even record our own content that goes along with our tool. And so what this waitlist, what this like entry level kind of version of our tool is designed to do is to allow people who have these small e-com brands to come in and learn how to start thinking correctly about lifetime margin, and then actually be able to build the queries with their own data, right? We ingest all of their Shopify data, and then they can run queries on it. And to be able to do that alongside kind of our educational piece as like a guide. So as they scale, they're asking better and better questions and getting better data. And they may set up a report and they need to wait 3 more months before they can make a decision on it. But they know, because they know how to read statistical significance, right? Because none of this stuff is really that hard. It just takes somebody explaining it to you who's kind of like walk the walk. And so that software portion, the part that we're doing the waitlist for now, initially just ingests all that Shopify data to let you understand the customer. The second phase of that, which will be coming out about a month or 2 later, lets you ingest all of your Google Analytics data that's fired from Shopify or whatever your tool du jour is, and marries the two things together. So then you can look at, for your specific landing page or for your specific product page, what do people who flow through that then go on and end up do, and then marry that with the customer portion. So oftentimes, as you kind of like scale, then that session data becomes a little more helpful or whatever. And then the third maturation of this is we have some relatively on rails type things that can allow you to do testing around shipping, can let you do testing around post-purchase, checkout level things or whatever. But my real goal is to create kind of that educational component that can let them stand a fighting chance against the big guys by having like a really weaponized view of their data. Because, quite frankly, if they're not working with us, I have low confidence that even these very large companies who are successful are actually doing a very good job.
Absolutely. And I love the Robin Hood analogy, and that's critical for up and coming entrepreneurs, because if you look at your competition, there are 8 and 9 figure brands that you're competing against, and it's inspiring to know that some of them are not looking at this data, and that you may be able to have an informational edge on some of these companies with lots of funding, lots of resources, lots of opportunity. So that's good to hear. I will post a link to that down in the show notes. If any of our listeners are interested in getting on that wait list, we'll post a link to that. So, Matthew, this has been a really good conversation. There is one more part of the podcast, and that is the fire round. It's 4 questions that we ask every entrepreneur who's been on the show. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Outstanding. So what is your favorite book?
Let's see. My favorite book, if you want to know about leadership within, like, I'm going to run a company and kind of band everyone together, The best book on leadership that I ever read is a fantasy fiction novel called The Way of Kings. It follows a individual who is essentially sentenced to death by having to run out into the front lines of this military campaign. And in the face of certain death, not knowing when it will come, he decides to band together the group of people that are sentenced with him and train them to let them live one more day. I've not found a more inspiring or helpful view on leadership, and I've certainly not found it in nonfiction.
Outstanding. I'm going to definitely add that to my reading list. Second question, what are your hobbies outside of e-commerce?
I really like doing things that don't have a dang thing to do with math or screens. So I very much like drawing and painting because it teaches me to pay attention to things. And one of my favorite things is to sit somewhere and draw like a building or even just a small like vignette of a place that is dear to me, and observe the way it changes the way that I interact with that place when I come back to it, because I've noticed so many little details.
I like it. Very nice. What is one thing you do not miss about working for the man?
One time I got invited to go to like an entrepreneurial like club at the university I went to, and they said, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur? And I said, I really don't like people telling me what to do. Uh-huh. And they said, elaborate. And I said, when people tell you to do stuff, I don't really like that. And they were like, oh, all right. I really don't miss people telling me what to do.
Yeah, same. And final question, what advice would you give to e-commerce entrepreneurs who are looking to scale their business?
Figure out if it's actually a good idea. You may be emotionally attached to a business right now that stands no reasonable chance of scale, and you're going to waste a lot of time because you can't face the fact that it's very scary, actually, sometimes to have to pivot. But be willing to do so. Like very, very important, I think, to determine whether or not like this is the thing or not. Because some of the most successful people I've ever met, the key to their success was early on the thing that they were working on, the thing that they were trying to do. They realized, actually, maybe like my first or my third idea actually wasn't the best idea. I needed to wait for idea 5, 7, or 500. And so don't be afraid to abandon ship for a better idea, even though it's very scary.
That's outstanding advice, and something that's very challenging to do. I have had several successful ventures. I've had probably 3 to 4x ventures that have failed. And that's a tough thing to do, is when you get into it and you realize, hey, this wasn't a good idea. It is the time and effort it seems to be lost. However, that may be the best chess move for the next stage of your career. So great advice. Now, Matthew, if people are interested in getting in touch with you, or if are a larger brand and are interested in working with Proteus, what's the best way to do that?
Well, we work with large brands only on referral, but this counts as a referral. So if you go to Proteus Digital Lab or go to the waitlist sign up, which will be linked in the show notes here, there'll be a sneaky little way for you to contact us through that page using Firing the Man as your referral.
Outstanding. Matthew, thank you so much for your time today, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Heck yeah. Cheers.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?